Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So as you can tell by the title, today's video is going to be about study tips, what I learned from VCE, and just basically how to make the most of your VCE or Year 12 experience. I wanted to split it up into two sections. So basically I'll have a section for specific study tips for the subjects that I studied in Year 12, and the second will just be for general study tips. So this video was highly requested, and by highly I mean like one person requested it and 3 people commented like what my study habits were. So this is for you guys. I also have like a notes thing, so if you see me looking down, that will be what it's for. So I'll just start with my subjects now. We have psychology. So for psychology, it really depends on how your teacher teaches. So for example, my teacher taught and relied really heavily on PowerPoints. So in class, all we would do is sit through some slides. Sometimes we would do like a fill-in exercise, but personally, I didn't find that too helpful in terms of retaining content. What I did was to take notes on my laptop from the slides in class, or if I didn't have time in class, I would do it at home myself. And when I took these notes down, I would make them as concise as possible, and sometimes the information in the slides would be out of order, so I made sure to order them and make sure that all the information is really clear. And if I didn't understand something that was going on, before I typed them up into my notes, I would make sure I cleared it up with the teacher. And so this was basically my proper learning process. After I have the electronic notes, I would handwrite them into a physical copy of notes, and these notes are like, I would say the psych magic words, consolidation. So this is the notebook that I use for all of my psych content. The important part is that I wrote in a really neat manner, so I felt really happy when I was looking at my notes. I typed them out first by hand and made sure like most, if not all, of the mistakes were sort of like filtered through. To study for psych, what I would do is make mind maps of everything. So I would have the main topic, then I would have branches going down into like 3 or 4 subtopics depending on how many there is for each chapter, and then in that I would have more subheadings and then have the content there if I needed, but mostly it was just for revision and making sure I knew what I needed to know. So for English, I really suggest reading the text twice at least. It doesn't have to be more or less than that, but I find that it really helps with clarification of like the timeline. You don't have to annotate or do anything crazy. No. Because I feel like most of that will come when your teacher goes through it with you in class. So I would say read it at least once in the holidays, and then after you start studying it again, and maybe in preparation for your SACs or the final exam, you can read it through again just to consolidate everything and make sure that you really see the book as a whole and not as separate parts that you've analyzed. The first time you can just absorb the information, like just read it for what it is. And for the second time, I would suggest really being aware of the themes that are being pushed through in the book, being aware of the timeline, creating a quote bank, really thinking deeply about how each scene illustrates a theme. And how it can be an example. Now we come to the analyzing book or text aspect. So there's a few steps to go through. So first you identify the overarching themes. So like for example, I did ransom, and for ransom there's like I can't really remember, it's been a while. Say there's like 5 overarching themes, and the next step is to look into what the texts say about the themes. And then after you have what the texts say about the themes, you then find the examples, and these examples will be illustrated through quotes, and that's where I come back with the quote bank. So the quote bank is really important because when you have the quote bank, you won't need to constantly look through the book, even though it's important to know where quotes are in the book, because you can't have the book in the final exam. I didn't think this was extremely important. Like a lot of people were like, oh, make sure you know exactly where the quotes are. Like whatever, I didn't care about that. When I went through the book for the second time, I took down all the quotes I thought could be relevant. I put them up into a table of quotes, and I'll put like something up here to show you exactly how I did that. So I organized the quotes by character and by theme. It makes it so easy to find, and if you only remember part of a quote, you can just like Control F one word and then you'll find the whole quote. It's amazing. Like that quote bank saved my entire life. Or you can even have a collaborative quote bank. I find that really helpful as well. This is really important because a lot of things that are easy to misunderstand about text, especially if they're really long or if there are lots of complicated themes. So when you write and submit an essay, it's not only about how you express yourself, but also about the actual facts that you might have misunderstood. So now we have methods. So methods was like one of my lower subjects, but it's like one of those subjects where your approach towards a subject will really depend on your skill level and also how good your teacher is. For me personally, I wasn't really able to understand or learn a lot from my teacher just because I wasn't able to follow his teaching. And what I found was that you could only really follow his teaching if you already had prior knowledge. I was going in completely blind. So for full disclaiming purposes, I did have a tutor. She basically taught me all the content. In class, I was not listening to the teacher at all because I didn't find him helpful. I'm sorry if you're out there and watching this video. So basically I used the class time to do my own work, and that way I was able to use the class time a lot more efficiently. So you have to decide if that is your situation, or maybe if you're in a situation where your teacher can actually help you a lot more than mine. Tips for SACs. I think it's really important to do checkpoints, or if your school gives you pre-SACs that you get marks for just for completing or just for handing in on time. Checkpoints are so important because you basically get all the concepts that you need for the SAC. And it's like organized by topic, right? So it's really good. I didn't personally do any, but that was such a mistake. I just bombed a lot of my SACs that way. And by not doing the pre-task as well. By not doing the pre-task, I also missed out on very important information that really helped on the SAC. The pre-task often has clues about what the actual SAC will be on. Make sure you do the pre-task. When you're revising for the final exam and you have those weeks off, it is really important that you remember quality over quantity. So if you have a really limited time and you didn't start practice exams too early, I would say just remember that you should at least get through all the previous VCAR exams and then the 2019 and 2020 commercial exams if you're doing methods this year. And that just gives you a really good grasp on the relevant and important concepts that you need to know for the methods exam. So it depends on your preference if you want to study for exam 1 and then exam 2. If you do too many exam 1s at the same time, you kind of get out of doing exam 2. Like, I would try to mix it up a bit. So I powered through a few, but then I didn't do too many before stopping to correct, because when you do too many, you're often making the same mistakes. It's just pointless then because you're not learning anything. So maybe do a few and then make sure I correct and take down all of the mistakes that I made and note down the mistake, maybe even in your bound reference, because when you make a mistake, the important thing is to not make it again. The fourth subject I did in year 12 was German. So for German, I had a really, really good German teacher, and she basically was perfect. She was like the best teacher I've ever had. And I have to say that the teacher is really important when choosing a subject, especially for language. And if you don't think that your teacher can support you enough through VCE, I think that you really need to take this into consideration before choosing German or any language. With that being said, for me, how I took notes throughout the year was this big book. So basically this book looks really fat, and that's because it is. It has 4 sections and it has a little pocket for each section. So the 4 sections that I have in my book are vocab, grammar notes, exercise, and exam. So when you have all your notes just clumped together, I didn't feel like that was particularly constructive because all of it would just get lost, and having it organized like this just helped me so much. So now on to vocab. So my biggest tip is to make sure that you know the few topics that you need to learn. So this might have changed with the new study design, but I think there was like entertainment, sports, lifestyle. There was like maybe 5, and I would really suggest memorizing vocab or learning it day by day under those topics, and that just gives you a really good range of vocabulary to use either in your work or just like recognizing things when you have reading comprehension or listening comprehension. And again, all this might change, so that's just my general tip. And for improving your listening skills or speaking as well, it's really good to watch TV shows, radio, and so on. I personally didn't do much of this. I did watch a few YouTube videos in the holidays, so I would try to find a few YouTube videos that appealed to me and watch them in German instead, and watch them with the captions on, because it's really important to also be good at reading quickly. So for the exam, I really suggest that you do as many practice exams as possible. I did like nearly all of them, and that really helped me fine-tune my reading comprehension skills, like answering the really long questions. This might change again with the study design, but that's what worked for me, and I feel like it's just good to do anyway. Yeah, and if you haven't gone into year 12 yet, you're still in like year 10 or 11, I really strongly suggest trying to do a German exchange where possible. I know it's not possible for everyone, and there's like limited spots and everything, but it just really helped me personally because I went on a German exchange for about 8 weeks, and that helped my German level so much. But in saying that, I do know people who have not been on exchange and have done like much better than me. Okay, so now for the second portion of the video. My first tip is regarding cramming. So personally for me, I find that cramming works, and it works for some subjects, for some people, and in certain situations. I was cramming for SACs and only for content subjects such as psych, but you have to find out if it works for you, and you have to make a conscious effort to either revise consistently so that you're not cramming, or if you do know that you can, give yourself still enough time to cram and then still lightly go over the information and make sure it's actually properly in your memory. If you forget the information when you panic, that's not good cramming. So in the conclusion, good for the short term, not good for long term. Okay, so my next tip is about socializing and your social life in general. So I would say it is really good to go to social events and parties in moderation. Going hand in hand with that would be having 1 or 2 extracurriculars or a job. Yeah, it just takes some stress off and gives you like mandated time where you don't have to be studying and not feel guilty about not studying, because I definitely felt that guilt so much in year 12. I have to mention that if you sort of deprive yourself of your social life during year 12, I feel like you could end up resenting people that do manage to have an active social life and also really good academics, or just even an active social life, because on social media all you see is people going out and having fun and sitting at home constantly forcing yourself to study and work. I just feel like it gives you like a build-up of resentment and a sense of unfairness that you're here studying while everyone else is out there like having fun. So letting yourself actually experience life, sorry to sound like an old person, but like doing that will actually give you a lot of mental relief from the stress and pressure. So my next tip is about self-care. So self-care can be taken a number of different ways. So I do think it's really important to give yourself rest breaks, not burn yourself out, and also to be aware of your limits, have good sleeping times, all of that. But too often I found that I use it as an excuse to procrastinate and give myself time off and just like slack off without any real reason or need to. It did help me come out of year 12 not feeling like it was the worst thing ever, but the stress from my procrastination make everything worse for me. So the main takeaway from this is to know your limit for self-care and definitely treat yourself, but not to the point where it's just become an excuse for slacking off. My last general tip is about social media. So for me personally, social media was the biggest drain of my entire year 12. So I strongly suggest making it less accessible. I don't believe in uninstalling, because when you deprive yourself completely, when you go cold turkey, I find that it's just as dissatisfying as going on it for a long time and then realizing all of a sudden that you've wasted all this time, because you'll miss it and be constantly thinking about it because you're like, oh, I've uninstalled blah blah blah. But if you are able to make the decision time from being like, oh, I'm going to open Instagram, to actually clicking it, if you make that as long as possible, you give yourself time to properly consider if it's appropriate right now for you to do it. So for example, I'll put it up on the screen, but right now I've put my social media apps as far away as possible from the home screen, and that really helps me to just like double think what my actions are actually doing. Like, am I just going to Instagram because it's automatic, or am I actually going because I want to talk to my friends, I want to post something? Like, I know it's hard to be productive on social media, but I try not to only use it for productive purposes like that. Yeah, fair warning, I didn't do this in year 12, I only just started doing it in the holidays, and it's just helped me not to waste my time away at home. Yeah, so that's all for my tips. I hope some of them were useful. This is just what works for me, and it might not work for everyone, but I feel like it's pretty general. I think the most important thing is to figure out how you personally study or function productively. Then make sure that you properly and effectively implement that in your life, and I feel like that mindset is the most important to have going into VCE. Just not to overwork yourself, and to be really mindful of how your mental and physical well-being is. So good luck to everyone doing VCE, or if you're preparing to go into VCE, and I hope these tips were helpful. Bye bye!